The dog couldn't leave the baby since he was born. The reason why broke everyone. A young widow leaves the hospital, clutching her newborn baby, still mourning the husband she buried just days ago. But as she steps into the cold light of morning, his dog refuses to move. The massive white guardian plants himself beside the baby's crib and never leaves. Not for a moment. Not for a night. At first it seems sweet, until the dog starts growling at people who get too close, even family. Then one day, he knocks a bottle from the mother's hand, saving the baby from something no one could have seen coming. Whispers turn to accusations. The mother's sanity is questioned. The dog becomes a target. But when the truth behind his devotion finally comes out, it shatters every heart that hears it. Why couldn't this dog leave the baby's side? And what secret did the father take to his grave? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The hospital doors sighed open and let in a slice of winter. Cold air slid across the linoleum, carrying the sting of snow and diesel. Rhea Whitlock tightened the blanket around the infant carrier on her forearm. Owen slept, cheeks flushed the pink of a shell, mouth parted in a soft O. His breath came with faint whistles that made her chest ache. "Do you have a ride, Mrs. Whitlock?" the nurse asked, rubbing her arms. "It's brisk out there." "I'm fine," Rhea said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Fine meant standing on a floor that kept shifting. Fine meant a husband gone 2 weeks and a baby who arrived anyway. Fine meant everything that mattered wrapped in a quilt with tiny trees on it. The nurse pushed the door with her hip. Wind punched in and flapped Rhea's coat. Snow fell in feathery scraps. And there, blocking the ramp, stood a massive white dog. He lifted his great head. Amber eyes locked on the carrier. His coat was winter-thick and dusted with gray, a bear of a creature with paws the size of soup bowls. He stepped forward once, slow and deliberate, and put himself between Rhea and the parking lot. "Whoa," the nurse breathed. "Is that yours?" Rhea's heart kicked. "Harbor," she said, both a name and a plea. The dog's ears twitched. He didn't move from the path. He leaned toward the carrier, nose working, breath warm and clean like wool in the sun. Then he did something that drew a small gasp from the nurse. He placed one paw gently against the stroller wheel, as if to stop it from rolling. "Is he safe?" the nurse whispered. "He's safe," Rhea said, though she didn't know anything for sure anymore. Harbor had belonged to her husband before he belonged to her. Dante had brought the dog home a year ago, with a grin and a shrug. "He's a good dog," he'd said, "the kind that watches the door when you sleep." Now the good dog stood like a posted guard at the threshold of the world. "It's all right," Rhea murmured. "We're going home." Harbor shifted aside just enough for her to pass. He fell in at her left hip, close enough that she felt the brush of his shoulder through her coat. Every time she adjusted her grip on the carrier, he matched her pace, head angled toward the blanket bundle. A security guard looked up and frowned. "Ma'am, animals." "He's leaving," the nurse called back. "He's house-trained." It sounded more like a question than a rule. Outside, the sky hung heavy and pale. Rhea's breath came out in plumes. Her old station wagon waited under a thin crust of snow. She popped the hatch with her elbow and set the carrier inside. Harbor jumped lightly up, turned once, then settled with his body curved so the carrier sat behind the shelter of his ribcage. "Not there," she said, half laughing. "I need to close the trunk." He stared at her and didn't move. "Buddy," she tried again, pushing at his shoulder. It was like trying to budge a pillow the size of a love seat. He yielded an inch and then eased back into place. The message was plain. I am staying here. She leaned her forehead against the cold metal and closed her eyes. She was too tired to argue with a dog. She slid the carrier out and transferred it to the back seat. Harbor leaped down, circled the car, and sprang into the back seat after it, settling sideways so that his chest pressed against the base of the carrier and his head could rest near Owen's feet. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Snow ticked against the windshield as she drove. The wipers moaned. Harbor didn't so much as blink at the movement. When Owen stirred, the dog's ear flicked. When the baby sighed, Harbor's tail thumped once, a muffled sound against the seat. The road out of town cut between a dark stand of pines and the frozen river. The world felt hollowed out. Houses hunched beneath their roofs. At every red light, Rhea glanced in the mirror at the white bulk and the tiny pink feet. Every time, Harbor looked back without moving, as if any twitch might let danger in. By the time she pulled into the cracked driveway, her hands had cramped on the steering wheel. The farmhouse crouched low against the field, its porch sagging a little in the middle like an old man's back. Dante had promised her it would look better in spring. She tried to imagine the long grass and the laundry line, and couldn't. She killed the engine. Silence rose up like a held breath. Harbor stood at once and planted himself beside the carrier. He waited for her to open the door, then hopped down and trotted to the porch with a quick glance over his shoulder, urging her along. He stayed at the threshold while she fumbled with the lock and only stepped inside after the door swung wide. Heat had sunk out of the house. It smelled like pine cleaner and old wood. She put the carrier on the kitchen table and set the diaper bag beside it with shaking hands. Harbor circled the table, sniffed near Owen's feet, and then sat with a huff that sounded like relief. His head settled so that his nose almost touched the blanket. "You love him already," she said. The words cracked. She swallowed. The phone rang. The sound jerked through the quiet. Rhea startled so hard the carrier rattled. Harbor stood, a low rumble in his chest. She snatched the receiver. "Rhea!" The voice slid into her ear like cold water. Merritt Coldwell never bothered with hello. "I hear you're home." She held the phone tighter. "We just walked in." "You'll want help," he said. "My driver is already on his way. Get the dog out of the house. I don't want that animal near my grandson." "This is my house." Her voice surprised her. It sounded small and steady at the same time. "Not if you can't keep it." Paper rustled on his end. "I have a court order drafted for temporary guardianship. The judge will sign it by morning. Don't be foolish. You can see the baby during scheduled visits." Her knees trembled. She locked them. "You lost your son," she said quietly. "I lost my husband. Let us breathe." "My son died," Merritt said, each word neat and hard, "because he let his guard down. I won't allow a repeat. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line clicked dead. The kitchen clock ticked once and stuck, as if even time was unsure. Harbor stared at her, head tilted. The baby made a soft squeak, the sound of a bird under snow. Rhea pressed the phone to the table with shaking fingers. "He's not taking you," she told Owen. She could feel her pulse in her throat, hammering against her collarbone. "He is not." Harbor paced 3 slow steps and then returned to Owen's side. He pressed his nose to the baby's foot and breathed there, a mothering gesture strange on a beast that size. Owen's toes curled. Harbor made a small sound, a note between a hum and a whine, and settled with his chest touching the table leg. Merritt's black sedan turned into the drive before the kettle boiled. Rhea heard the tires crunch ice and froze for a heartbeat, hand hovering over the cupboard where she kept the tea. Harbor stood. His tail rose like a banner. A fist pounded the door. She jumped. Harbor moved ahead of her, body rigid, hackles lifting in a white wave down his spine. Rhea opened the door 2 inches and saw Merritt's wool coat, the sharp angle of his jaw, the silver in his hair combed back like a blade. His eyes went straight to the carrier on the table, and then to the dog. "Step aside." His breath steamed. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking just fine," she said. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the door. "You're not coming in." Merritt shifted his shoulder into the gap. Harbor took one silent step forward and filled the doorway. He did not bark. He simply opened his mouth and showed, his teeth large and clean, and lifted his head so his eyes met Merritt's at the level of a man's sternum. The low growl that came out of him vibrated the wood beneath Rhea's palm. "Leash your animal," Merritt said without taking his gaze off Harbor. His voice thinned. "Now." "He's protecting the baby," Rhea said. "From whom?" Merritt snapped. "Me?" Harbor's rumble deepened. He didn't break eye contact. Rhea could feel the sound in her ribs. "I'll call the sheriff," Merritt said. "Call him," she said. "Call whoever you want. I'm not handing over my son at my kitchen door." Footsteps sounded on the porch boards. A second man, heavy-set, came up behind Merritt and peered over his shoulder. His eyes flicked from dog to carrier and back, calculating. Harbor turned his head an inch. The man took a reflexive step back. Rhea drew the door in tight. "You can wait outside. I'll bring the baby to the clinic when there's a proper hearing. Until then, you stay off my porch." "You don't give orders here," Merritt said, but he put his hand on the rail. The cold reddened his knuckles. For a long moment, no one moved. Snow hissed against the hedges. The baby breathed. Harbor stood without wavering, as if he could hold the whole turn of events still with nothing but muscle and will. Merritt's lip curled. "You always were stubborn," he said. "You married into my name and thought it made you strong." Rhea let air out slowly. "I was strong before your name, and I'll be strong after." He gave a short laugh that had no humor in it. "You won't manage a week. I'll send child services in the morning. The dog goes, the boy goes, you can fight me, but it will end the way it always does." He turned, coat flaring, and went down the steps with the second man in his wake. The sedan backed out, tires squalling. Only when the engine noise faded did Harbor lower his head. He exhaled once, a heavy sound, and then walked to the table and lay down with his ribs touching the chair leg that faced the door. Rhea shut the lock with a small metallic click. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed her palms to the warm wooden edge of the table until the tremor slowed. Owen stirred and began to fuss, a thin sound that trembled the air. Harbor raised his head and made the soft humming noise again. "I know," she whispered. "I know." She lifted Owen and tucked him against her shoulder. He smelled like milk and laundry soap and something new and frighteningly delicate. Harbor stood with her and leaned close, one enormous ear brushing her sleeve. She felt the heat of him and took comfort from that living weight. "Okay," she said to both of them and to herself. "We'll do this. We'll figure this out." She anchored the carrier in the bedroom and set the baby down. Harbor followed and placed his chin on the crib rail. Every time she pulled the blanket up, he watched. Every time she turned, toward the door, he moved to stand between the crib and the room. Rhea went back to the kitchen and stared at the phone. She thought of the one person in town who might look at Harbor and see what she saw. Purpose, not threat. The old business card was still on the side of the fridge, held by a chipped magnet shaped like a peach. Dr. Gideon Parr, DVM. She had meant to call him about shots once, months ago, and never had. Her finger hovered above the numbers. Harbor's nails clicked softly on the wood floor as he paced once and returned to the crib. Outside, snow thickened. The house felt like a ship locked in ice. Rhea dialed. "Gideon Parr," a voice said on the second ring, quiet and even. She gripped the phone harder. "Doctor, I'm sorry to call after hours. It's about my dog," she said, and her gaze slid to the crib, to the listening white head. "And my baby." Harbour lifted his ears. The kettle finally boiled. It shrieked into the silence like an alarm. Rhea turned off the burner with a shaky hand and drew in a breath that felt like the first one all day. "He won't leave him," she said into the receiver. "He won't leave the baby at all." On the porch, wind rattled the loose board Merritt had stepped on. It knocked once like a warning. And in the bedroom, Harbour's low hum rose again, steady, certain, while the snow kept falling and the night pressed close around the house. The morning after Merritt's visit dawned gray and brittle. The snow had stopped, but the world outside Rhea's window looked carved from ice. She hadn't slept much. Every creak of the house made her jolt awake, half expecting another knock at the door. Harbour hadn't left Owen's side once. When the baby cried in the night, the dog rose first, pressing his head near the crib until Rhea stumbled over, bleary-eyed, to feed or rock him. It was strange how much comfort she drew from that soft, steady presence, the rhythm of Harbour's breathing filling the silence between Owen's small sounds. She sipped coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Her phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. She didn't have to guess. "Mrs. Whitlock." The voice was brisk, female, practiced. "This is Child and Family Services. We received a referral concerning safety concerns for your infant. We'd like to conduct a home visit this afternoon." Rhea's hand tightened around the mug. "A referral from who?" "I'm not authorized to disclose that." "Of course not." Merritt didn't waste time. Harbour lifted his head at her tone. The call ended with polite phrases. "Cooperative? Routine check? No need to worry." When she hung up, her chest felt hollow. She glanced down at Owen in his bassinet. He had one hand curled near his face, his tiny mouth working in sleep. Harbour lay inches away, nose almost touching the baby's socked foot. "I think they're coming to take you," she whispered. "And I don't know how to stop. Them!" Harbour made a low sound, half growl, half whine, as if he could sense her fear and answer it. By noon, Rhea had tried to make the house look less like grief lived there. She folded laundry that wasn't dirty, straightened bookshelves, hid the half-empty whiskey bottle Merritt had left behind after the funeral. She even placed Harbour's leash on a hook by the door, a token gesture of order. When the knock came, she froze. Two people stood on the porch, a woman in a navy coat with a clipboard, and a young man with an apologetic smile holding a camera. The woman introduced herself as Ms. Albright. "This is just documentation," she said, motioning to the camera. Harbour stepped forward, silent but enormous. The young man took a quick step back. "Is the animal restrained?" Albright asked. "He's trained," Rhea said, forcing calm. "He won't hurt anyone." The social worker's gaze drifted past her, toward the crib. "We've had concerns about aggressive behavior and environmental hazards." "Hazards," Rhea's jaw tightened. "We're fine. Please, come in." They entered. The air felt smaller with them in it. Harbour stayed between Rhea and Owen, his movements slow, deliberate, watchful. The camera clicked softly as they noted the peeling paint, the draft from the window, the too small crib. "How long have you had the dog?" Albright asked. "Since before my husband passed." "Any incidents of violence?" "Only against people who deserved it," Rhea thought, but said nothing. Harbour's tail flicked once, low. Owen stirred, and the woman's tone softened. "He's beautiful. How old?" 2 weeks? Ms. Albright wrote something down. You're aware an untrained large-breed animal can pose risk to an infant? Ria's voice broke through her trembling. He's not untrained. My husband. She stopped. She couldn't explain Harbor's strange precision without proof. Not yet. He knows what he's doing. The woman gave her a practiced, neutral smile. We'll be in touch. They left with their polite goodbyes and quiet judgments. When the door shut, Ria pressed her forehead against it and breathed until the tears subsided. Harbor walked over and rested his head against her leg. His fur was warm, grounding. I know, she whispered. I know he's behind this. That evening, the phone rang again. Merritt's voice, smooth as oil. I trust the inspection went well. They'll see reason soon enough. It's not too late to sign guardianship voluntarily, Ria. Save yourself the embarrassment. She felt anger rise like heat behind her eyes. You're trying to take my son because you couldn't control your own. You're emotional, Merritt said evenly. You don't know what that child needs. I know he needs protection. From you. The line went dead again, his favorite exit. Ria turned to Harbor, pacing near the crib. We'll need help, she said, aloud. I can't do this alone. That night she loaded Owen into the car. Harbor jumped in behind them, his head nearly touching the roof. They drove through the dark toward the single lit window of Gideon Parr's veterinary clinic. The vet opened the door wearing a flannel shirt in surprise. You weren't kidding, he murmured when he saw Harbor's size. Ria stepped in, exhaustion shadowing her face. He won't leave the baby, not for a second. People think he's dangerous, but I swear he's trying to tell me something. Gideon crouched, studying the dog. Harbor didn't flinch, just stared back, alert and unblinking. Let's find out what, Gideon said quietly. For the first time in days, Ria felt the faintest flicker of hope. The clinic smelled faintly of cedar shavings and antiseptic. Ria stood in the doorway clutching Owen's carrier while Harbor filled the threshold behind her, a snow-white sentinel. The overhead light made the dog's coat shimmer like frost. Dr. Gideon Parr wiped his hands on a towel and nodded toward the examination room. Let's start with introductions, he said. You've got quite the guardian there. Ria exhaled shakily. He's been like this since Owen was born. He won't leave him, not for a second. Gideon knelt, moving slow. That right, big fella? He murmured. Harbor sniffed his sleeve, then shifted slightly so his body still blocked the carrier. Gideon's eyes flicked up to Ria. Protective, not aggressive, he said. There's a difference. For the first time in days, she felt someone was on her side. Gideon motioned to a small bench. Sit, tell me everything from the start. Ria told him about the hospital, about Merritt's threats, about the child services visit. Every word made her pulse jump. She could hear her own voice shaking. He was trained by my husband, she finished, but I don't know for what, just that he's watching, all the time. Gideon studied Harbor as she spoke. Your husband, what did he do? He worked at Coldwell Quarry, foreman. The vet nodded slowly. Dogs trained by quarrymen sometimes get special work, rescue scent drills, alerting for gases, that sort of thing. But this is different. He crouched again, running his palm near Harbor's shoulder without touching. Notice how his eyes track the baby's chest? Not your movements, not sounds. Breathing. Ria's stomach tightened. You think he's monitoring him? Could be. Gideon's voice softened. He's reacting to something we can't see. Could be smell, could be body chemistry. Some service dogs detect blood sugar or seizures. The idea landed in Ria's chest like a spark. So he's not being weird. He's doing his job. Exactly. Harbor gave a small grunt, as if in agreement. Gideon stood. If you're willing, I'd like to run an observation. Nothing invasive, just monitor how he behaves around the baby for a few minutes. Rhea nodded. She placed the carrier on the exam table. Harbor immediately sat, eyes fixed on Owen's face. Gideon set a digital recorder nearby and jotted timestamps. Every few minutes, Owen made small sounds, hiccups, tiny sighs, and Harbor responded before Rhea could move. A soft nudge, a whine, a repositioning closer. After 10 minutes, Gideon said quietly, "He's alerting to something. Watch this." He switched off the overhead light, letting the soft hum of the incubator fill the silence. Owen stirred, a faint flutter in his limbs. Harbor let out a low, almost melodic hum, the same one Rhea had heard every night. The monitor on Gideon's wrist beeped once. He frowned. "I put a temp sensor in the carrier for reference. The baby's surface temperature just dropped 2 degrees. Rhea's hand flew to her mouth. He knew? Gideon nodded slowly. He knew before the machine. The drive home felt different. For the first time, Rhea wasn't terrified of Harbor's intensity. She was in awe. The dog rode in the back seat, his head near Owen, calm and focused. When they pulled into the driveway, Rhea sat a moment before getting out. "You're not crazy," she said softly to herself. "He's saving him." But relief lasted only until she saw the mailbox flag raised. Inside was a thick envelope, stamped with Merritt Coldwell's law firm seal, custody hearing, expedited. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Court date in 5 days. Harbor leaned against her knee. "They won't believe me," she whispered. "Not without proof." The dog's steady eyes seemed to say otherwise. Later that evening, a truck slowed at the end of her drive. The driver's window lowered just long enough for someone to toss a crumpled flyer onto the snow. Rhea walked out, heart pounding, Harbor pacing beside her. The flyer fluttered in the wind, a printed photo of Harbor's face with the word "dangerous" in bold black letters. Her breath caught. Merritt had started a campaign. She turned, pressing her back against the door as Harbor stood beside her, motionless, watchful. In the house, Owen began to cry. Rhea scooped him up, whispering, "I won't let him take you." Harbor stood guard at the window, the falling snow catching in his fur like ash. That night, she called Gideon again. "If I can't prove what Harbor's doing, they'll use him against me," she said. "We'll prove it," Gideon replied. "Bring him back tomorrow. I'll help you gather data, behavior logs, temperature readings, anything that shows correlation. I'll testify if I have to." "You'd do that?" "I've seen a lot of dogs," he said, "but I've never seen one lie." Rhea hung up and looked down at Harbor. The big dog's head was resting on his paws, eyes half closed but still fixed toward the crib. In that quiet room, surrounded by shadows and the soft hiss of the wind, Rhea realized she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Snow dusted the ground again the next morning, turning the world ghostly pale. Rhea tightened her scarf and packed Owen's bag for the scheduled visitation at Merritt's estate. The custody hearing loomed only a few days away, and her lawyer, an overworked public defender, had insisted she attend to demonstrate good faith. "Good faith," she muttered, buckling the carrier straps. "That man doesn't know the meaning." Harbor stood at the door, tense, sensing her unease. He always did. When she loaded Owen into the car, he leaped into the back seat without a word from her. His gaze never left the baby once. Merritt's house rose from the frozen field like a fortress. Rhea's pulse quickened as she parked in the gravel drive. She could already see him waiting on the porch, coat immaculate, a mug steaming in his hand. "Rhea," he greeted, voice smooth but sharp beneath. "You made it." Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." She stepped out, chin high. "I'm only here for Owen. This isn't about you." Inside, the house smelled of polished wood and cigar smoke. A housekeeper hurried forward to take her coat. Merritt gestured toward the sitting room. "You'll want to feed the baby before we talk business. Lydia can prepare his formula." Rhea hesitated, then nodded. "All right." Harbor stayed pressed against her leg as she set Owen's carrier on the rug. His gaze followed Lydia to the kitchen, tail still. Merritt sat opposite her. "You've been under stress," he began. "You've lost your husband. You're isolated." "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't turn my grief into a weapon." He smiled thinly. "I'm offering help, Rhea. The court won't see it that way if you resist." Lydia returned with a bottle warmed just right. Rhea reached for it, exhaustion making her hands clumsy. Harbor suddenly rose, lips lifting in a low snarl. "Harbor!" she gasped. "Stop!" But the dog lunged, not at Lydia, not at Merritt, but at the bottle. He struck it from Rhea's hand. Milk splattered across the carpet. The room froze. "Good Lord!" Merritt snapped, standing. "That animal is insane!" Rhea's heart hammered. "He's never done that before." "Enough!" Merritt roared. "You bring a feral beast into my home and expect me to trust you with my grandson?" Lydia knelt to clean the mess, cheeks pale. Rhea scooped up Owen, trembling. Harbor stood rigid, eyes locked on the spilled milk as if it were a threat. Gideon's voice from the night before echoed in her head. "He's reacting to something you can't see." She turned on Merritt, shaking. "You'll have to excuse me. We're leaving." He followed her to the door, furious. "This will go into the record, Rhea. I'll make sure of it." "Do that," she said, and slammed the door behind her. Back home, the silence felt too loud. Harbor paced, unsettled. Rhea couldn't shake the image of that bottle hitting the rug. She called Gideon immediately. "He knocked it out of my hand," she said breathlessly. "Wouldn't let me feed Owen." "What was in it?" "Formula from Merritt's housekeeper." "Bring me a sample if you still have it." Rhea hesitated, then remembered her diaper bag. Some had splashed inside. "I'll come now." At the clinic, Gideon's expression darkened as he ran the test. The machine beeped low and steady until the results flashed across the screen. "Rhea," he said quietly, "this isn't formula. There's propranolol in it, a heart medication, strong enough to sedate an adult." Her mouth went dry. If Owen had swallowed, he wouldn't have woken up. Rhea pressed a hand to her mouth, choking on disbelief. "He tried to kill my baby." "Someone did," Gideon said, "and Harbor knew before any of us." Rhea left the clinic in a fog. The streetlights blurred through her tears. Harbor's head rested across Owen's lap in the carrier, unblinking, protective. At home, she fed Owen a fresh bottle, then sat on the floor beside Harbor. "You saved him," she whispered, running her fingers through his fur. "You knew." Harbor leaned closer, sighing as if he understood. When the baby finally slept, Rhea stood by the window and stared into the snowy dark. Merritt's house loomed only a few miles away, but it felt like another world, a world built on power and lies. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered with a shaking hand. Merritt's voice came low and venomous. "You've crossed a line, Rhea. Don't come back to my property again." She hung up without replying, heart pounding. Harbor raised his head, ears twitching. She sank to her knees beside him. "We're not safe anymore." Harbor's tail gave one slow thump. Then he went back to watching the crib. The wind howled over the roof that night, dragging branches against the siding like skeletal fingers. Rhea couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that bottle shattering on Merritt's rug, milk splattering like snow, and Harbor's jaws clamping shut inches from her hand. At dawn, she rose, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made coffee strong enough to burn. The house creaked, settling in the cold. Harbor lay beside the crib, but his eyes tracked her every movement. Something gnawed at her mind. He was trained for something. Dante taught him this. The thought kept repeating until she couldn't ignore it anymore. She went out to the barn. The latch was rusted, stiff from months of neglect. Inside, dust motes hung like smoke in the pale morning light. Tools were scattered on a bench. Wrenches, a busted lantern, old ropes stiff with mud. But what caught her eye was the locked metal cabinet in the corner. She found the key where Dante had always kept it, nailed to a beam behind a horseshoe. Her hand shook as she turned it in the lock. The door creaked open to reveal something she hadn't expected. Neatly stacked training canisters, a whistle, and a worn, leather-bound notebook. Rhea picked it up. The pages smelled faintly of oil and cedar. Her husband's handwriting filled the first few, strong, blocky letters she hadn't seen since before the accident. Harbor, scent training, phase 3. Focus target, medium chain disorder. Target human scent variation. Blood sugar crisis, low temperature. Reinforcement positive, success rate 92%. Rhea blinked, rereading the words until they blurred. Medium chain disorder? She carried the notebook inside, heart hammering, and called Gideon. When he arrived, he didn't even take off his coat. "Show me." She laid the notebook open on the table. He read in silence for a long moment, lips pressed tight. "This isn't standard rescue work," he said finally. "This is medical detection training, advanced and—" He tapped the page. "This disorder, it's hereditary." Her breath caught. "Hereditary?" He nodded grimly. "Your husband must have known. It affects how the body processes fat for energy. During stress, blood sugar can crash suddenly. In an infant, that could be fatal." Rhea sank into a chair. "He never told me." "Maybe he thought he'd beaten it," Gideon said gently. "Or maybe he thought he'd keep the baby safe without worrying you." She stared at the notes. Owen at risk. Her husband had written those exact words months before his death. And now it made perfect sense. Harbor's constant watching, the pacing before feedings, the humming when Owen stirred. He wasn't acting strange, he was alerting. Rhea wiped her face with trembling hands. "He's been saving my son over and over, and I didn't even know." Gideon closed the notebook. "You need to take this to a doctor. Get Owen tested. I can connect you with a pediatric geneticist in town." She nodded, unable to speak. Harbor stood near the table, eyes steady, tail sweeping the floor once as if to say, "Now you understand." Later that afternoon, Rhea sat in the nursery, staring at the snow falling outside. Each flake drifted slow and silent, like ash from a long dead fire. The truth weighed heavy in her chest. Dante had known. He'd prepared for this, for them. Even after death, he'd protected their child. But beneath that revelation stirred a darker thought. Merritt had to know about this too. He'd hidden the condition from everyone to protect his family's image. His son's weakness wasn't allowed to exist. If Merritt found out she knew, he wouldn't stop at intimidation. He'd destroy everything to keep that secret buried. The phone buzzed. It was Gideon. "Appointment set," he said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. Don't be late." She looked over at Harbor. He was watching Owen sleep, his body forming a white wall between the crib and the door. "I won't," she said softly. "We're done hiding." That night, the house felt both safer and more dangerous at once. Safe because she finally understood Harbor's purpose. Dangerous because she knew too much now. When she closed her eyes, she could still see Dante at the quarry, laughing, strong, confident, and then gone in an instant. She could almost hear him whisper through the wind rattling the windows. "Trust the dog, Rhea. He knows what I don't." She reached down and stroked Harbor's head. His fur was warm, soft, and steady beneath her fingers. "Tomorrow," she murmured. "We'll prove it tomorrow." And in the stillness of that winter night, she felt, just for a moment, that her husband was there, watching through the eyes of the loyal creature he'd left behind. The pediatric geneticist's office was warm and bright, a strange contrast to the icy world outside. Rhea sat rigid in the chair while the doctor, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair and kind eyes, read through Gideon's forwarded notes. Harbor waited by the stroller, head resting near Owen's tiny feet, his eyes never leaving the baby's face. "So," the doctor said at last, tapping the paper, "you believe the child may have inherited a metabolic condition and that this dog detects the onset of crises?" "Yes, ma'am," Rhea said, gripping her hands in her lap. "He's already stopped one. Maybe more. Please, test him." The doctor gave a small, reassuring nod. "We'll run a preliminary screening today. Results take a few days, but initial panels can show tendencies." While the nurse drew a small vial of Owen's blood, Rhea held her breath. Harbor stayed perfectly still, gaze fixed on the baby's face, not on the needle. When the baby whimpered, Harbor gave one low, vibrating hum that seemed to calm him instantly. The nurse blinked. "That's uncanny." The doctor smiled faintly. "Some service dogs are more intuitive than science can explain." Outside, the wind sliced cold across the parking lot. Gideon was waiting by his truck, one hand braced against the door. "How'd it go?" "They took samples." Rhea lifted the carrier into her car. "We'll know soon." Harbor jumped in after it, already resuming his post. Gideon nodded toward the dog. "He hasn't relaxed once since I've known him. That kind of focus, it's training, but it's also bond. You realize he's attached to Owen in a way that's not typical?" Rhea smiled faintly. "Maybe he's attached to what's left of Dante." The words came out before she could stop them. Gideon's expression softened. "Maybe," he said quietly. That night, Rhea fell asleep in the armchair by the crib. She woke to Harbor pacing, low whining under his breath. Owen was still, too still. Panic surged through her chest. She checked his skin, cold, clammy. His breath came faint, shallow. "Gideon!" she screamed into the phone. "It's happening. Feed him immediately. Sugar water. Anything fast. I'm coming." Her hands shook as she followed the instructions. Harbor pressed against her leg, barking once, sharp and urgent. She managed to get a few drops into Owen's mouth. Then another. Slowly, color crept back into his cheeks. When Gideon arrived 10 minutes later, Rhea was crying silently, holding her baby against her chest. "He's breathing normal again," she whispered. "Harbor knew. He woke me before it got bad." Gideon crouched, rubbing the dog's neck. "He saved him again." Rhea swallowed hard. "How do I prove that in court?" The next day, the test results came back. Owen had the same metabolic condition Dante once suffered as a child. It was official. Rhea sat in Gideon's office, staring at the paper until her vision blurred. "It's genetic," Gideon said gently. "It can be managed, but it's dangerous if untreated." Rhea's voice broke. "Merritt knew. He must have known and covered it up." Gideon leaned forward. "Then this isn't just about custody anymore. It's about neglect. He let his son work a quarry with this condition. It could have killed him." Rhea pressed a hand over her mouth. And it did. The The silence that followed was heavy and final. "We take this to court," Gideon said at last. "You'll need documentation, the vet logs, the genetic report, your husband's notes, and Harbor's demonstration." "Demonstration?" He nodded. "We'll show them exactly what this dog can do." Rhea felt the smallest flicker of hope ignite again. "Then we fight." 2 nights later, she couldn't sleep. The storm outside battered the windows, and every gust felt like a warning. Merritt hadn't called, hadn't shown up, but that was worse. Silence meant planning. She sat at the table, papers spread before her, her husband's notebook, the test results, Gideon's observations. Harbor sat by the door, ears twitching at every sound. "You're our proof," she told him softly. "They can't take him if they know you save him." Harbor lifted his head, eyes reflecting the lamplight, steady and unafraid. Rhea reached out and brushed his fur. "We're going to win, boy. I promise." From the crib came a soft coo. Owen stirring, safe again for now. But outside, hidden beyond the snow and dark, the faint sound of a car engine idled in the distance before slipping away down the road. Rhea didn't hear it. Harbor did. His ears pricked. He stared at the window until dawn. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and coffee, that mix of old bureaucracy and fear. Rhea sat at the wooden table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Across from her, Merritt leaned back in his tailored suit, a picture of calm authority. His lawyer shuffled papers with quiet confidence. Gideon sat beside Rhea, his expression steady. Harbor lay at her feet, wearing a service harness Gideon had brought. His presence, silent but commanding, drew uneasy stares from the gallery. Owen rested in a carrier beside her, sleeping peacefully, unaware that his future was being decided in this room. Judge Morton adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said kindly but firmly, "you understand today's hearing determines temporary custody and the safety arrangements for your child." Rhea nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Your Honor," Merritt's lawyer began with rehearsed indignation. "The evidence will show my client only seeks his grandson's welfare. The mother, grieving, isolated, has refused medical oversight and maintains an unrestrained, aggressive animal near the infant." Rhea felt Gideon tense beside her. The lawyer's words pricked like needles. Then it was their turn. Gideon stood. "Your Honor, this animal isn't a threat. He's a protector, trained by the late Mr. Coldwell to detect dangerous metabolic episodes. The baby's life depends on him." The courtroom murmured. Merritt's expression flickered for a fraction of a second. "Do you have proof?" the judge asked. "Yes, sir. A live demonstration." Rhea's pulse pounded. Gideon gestured to a nurse stationed nearby. She adjusted Owen's blanket, placed a small glucose monitor on the baby's foot. Harbor sat, alert, motionless. A minute passed. 2. Then the monitor flashed a dip in numbers. Before anyone else reacted, Harbor rose, gave a low hum, and nudged the carrier, once precise, just as Rhea had seen so many times before. The beeping grew louder. The nurse glanced at the display, startled. "He's right," she whispered. "Blood sugar drop." A hush swept the room. Judge Morton leaned forward, voice lowered. "Did you train him for this?" Rhea shook her head, eyes stinging. "My husband did, before he died." Merritt's face turned gray. His lawyer stammered something about coincidence, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. When the demonstration ended, the courtroom was utterly still. "I've seen many custody cases," Judge Morton said, gaze fixed on Merritt, "but I've never seen an animal save a child's life in real time." He turned to Rhea. "Until final review, custody remains with the mother. The dog is to stay with the child as a certified medical service animal." Rhea's breath caught, relief and disbelief mixing in her chest. Merritt stood slowly, jaw tight, eyes burning. As the judge exited, Gideon leaned close. "You did it." Rhea looked down at Harbor, who was now lying beside Owen again, calm as ever. "No," she whispered. "He did." The night after the court hearing, the farmhouse stood quiet under a deep layer of snow. Rhea finally felt something close to peace. The papers were signed. Owen was safe, for now. Harbor lay beside the crib, his breathing heavy but steady, soothed at last by the lull of a quiet home. Outside, the wind whispered through the bare trees. Rhea sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea and watching the fire burn low in the stove. For the first time in weeks, her hands didn't shake. She thought of Dante, of how proud he'd be of their boy, and of Harbor, his final gift of love and protection. Sometime after midnight, a faint pop echoed from outside. Harbor's ears twitched. He stood, sniffing the air, and growled low in his chest. Rhea frowned. "It's just the wind, boy." But then came another sound, a drip, thick and oily, followed by the unmistakable scent of gasoline. Her heart froze. She shot to her feet just as the back porch erupted in a flash of orange. The windows rattled. A second later, the kitchen curtains caught. "Harbor!" she cried, grabbing Owen from his crib. Smoke thickened instantly, black and choking. The baby coughed weakly, terrified. The fire raced up the walls. The door handle glowed red-hot. Rhea tried the side window. It was stuck, painted shut years ago. Flames climbed toward the ceiling. Harbor lunged at the drywall, digging with frantic strength. Chunks of plaster fell as he tore a hole wide enough for a crawl space. Through the haze, Rhea saw daylight, or maybe moonlight, glinting off snow outside. "Go!" she coughed, pushing Owen's bassinet through. Harbor slipped into the opening first, then barked until she followed, crawling through the jagged gap, her lungs screaming. The baby's wails mixed with the roar of flames behind them. The floor collapsed just as she wriggled through to the porch. A rush of cold air hit her like salvation. She stumbled into the snow, clutching Owen close. Harbor burst out behind her, his fur singed, dragging the baby's blanket in his jaws. He staggered, panting hard, then sank into the snow beside them. Rhea knelt, sobbing, pressing her face into his neck. "You saved us," she whispered hoarsely. "You saved us again." Headlights cut through the storm. Gideon struck. He jumped out, shouting her name. "Rhea!" He saw the flames and ran to them, throwing his coat over Owen. "My God," he breathed, pulling them both away from the blaze. "What happened?" Rhea looked over his shoulder. The house that had been her whole world burned like a torch against the night. "Someone said it," she rasped. "He said it." Gideon's eyes hardened. "Merritt?" She nodded. "Who else?" He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Then we're done running," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, we end this." Harbor gave a weak, muffled bark, his head resting on Rhea's lap. She stroked his soot-stained fur until the sirens wailed in the distance, echoing through the snow, carrying the promise of both rescue and reckoning. By morning, the fire was only smoldering ash. The air still carried the acrid scent of smoke and loss. Rhea stood wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her face pale beneath the soot, as investigators moved through the wreckage with cameras and metal tools. Harbor lay nearby on a blanket of his own, one leg bandaged, his chest rising and falling steadily. Owen slept against Rhea's chest, safe, unaware of the ruin around them. A uniformed investigator approached. "Ma'am, we found accelerant traces through the kitchen and porch," he said. "This wasn't an accident. Someone meant to burn you out." Rhea's throat tightened. "You're sure?" He nodded grimly. "Positive. And your neighbor's camera caught a pickup truck on the road right before the fire started. Plates were covered, but we'll enhance the image." Gideon joined them, his face drawn from a sleepless night. "You know whose truck it is," he said quietly. Rhea didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could already see Merritt's foreman, Colton, with his hollow eyes and nervous hands, fueling a can in the dark. The investigator lowered his voice. "If you're suggesting arson for insurance, that's a criminal." Rhea cut him off sharply. "Insurance? That man tried to kill my baby." Her voice cracked, echoing across the field. Harbor lifted his head, ears twitching, as if ready to defend her again. Gideon placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Let us handle it, Rhea. We'll get him." By afternoon, the evidence began to piece itself together. The gas station clerk identified Colton from a surveillance still, buying kerosene and matches an hour before the fire. The police picked him up outside the quarry before sunset. Under questioning, he folded fast. "He said it was just to scare her," the detective told Rhea later that evening. "But when we told him about the baby, he cracked. He confessed. Said Merritt ordered it. Told him to make the problem go away." Rhea closed her eyes. Her hands trembled around the mug of coffee someone had pressed into them. "So now it's over," she whispered. "Not yet," Gideon said. "But now we have proof." At the clinic that night, Harbor lay on a mat while Gideon changed his bandages. The dog winced but didn't make a sound. Owen cooed from the nearby crib. The sight of the two of them, scarred protector and fragile child, made Rhea's eyes sting. She crouched beside Harbor and stroked his fur. "You kept your promise," she murmured. "Even when the rest of the world tried to take him." Gideon looked at her. "Tomorrow we take everything to the sheriff. Merritt won't walk away from this." Rhea nodded slowly. The weight of fear that had pressed on her for months finally began to lift. "Then tomorrow," she said softly, "we end him with the truth." Outside, the last embers of her burned house flickered in the snow like dying stars. Harbor's tail gave one faint thump, as if in agreement. The dawn came pale and cold, brushing soft light over the blackened skeleton of Rhea's farmhouse. Smoke still hung low, clinging to the ground like fog. She stood at the edge of the wreckage, wrapped in Gideon's coat. Owen swaddled in her arms, Harbor lying beside them with his bandaged paw resting in the snow. "They have him," Gideon said, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Colton confessed. The sheriff's bringing Merritt in this morning." Rhea didn't answer at first. She stared at the ruins of her life. Everything burned but the truth. "He'll deny it," she said finally. "He always does." "Not this time," Gideon replied. "We've got Colton's statement, the fuel receipt, and your husband's journal. He can't hide anymore." Rhea looked down at Harbor. The dog met her gaze, eyes steady, alert. "Then let's finish this." The sheriff's office felt colder than the morning air. When they brought Merritt into the interrogation room, he looked smaller than she remembered. Tired, pale, his arrogance dulled, but not gone. He still wore the same perfect coat, the symbol of his control. "Mrs. Whitlock," he greeted smoothly, "I hear you've made quite a spectacle of my family name." Rhea's jaw tightened. "Your son died keeping your secret, and you tried to kill us to bury it." He smiled faintly. "You're emotional. That's what grief does to women." Gideon's voice cut through the room, quiet but firm. "Your foreman already confessed, Mr. Coldwell. He told us you ordered the fire." The sheriff placed a recorder on the table and pressed play. Colton's shaking voice filled the silence. "He said scare her, said no one would get hurt. I didn't know the baby'd be inside." Merritt's composure cracked. His fingers twitched. "He's lying." Rhea stepped forward. "No, you are. You made your son hide a condition that killed him, and when you couldn't control his child, you tried to erase him too." The sheriff closed the folder. We have enough to charge you. You'll be held without bail." Merritt leaned back, his voice low, dangerous. "You think the world will believe a widow and a mutt over a cold well?" Ria's eyes burned. They already do. By afternoon, the headlines were everywhere. Local magnate arrested in arson plot. Widow and infant survive thanks to hero dog. Ria didn't read them. She sat in Gideon's truck, watching the snow fall, feeling the first calm she'd known in months. "It's really over," she said softly. Gideon nodded. "He'll spend the rest of his life answering for it. You and Owen are safe now." She looked at Harbor resting in the back seat, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling with slow, heavy breaths. "He never gave up on us," she murmured. "Not once." "He did what your husband trained him to do," Gideon said. "He kept his family alive." Weeks later, Ria moved into a small cottage on the ridge above town. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a wood stove, but it was warm and quiet. Owen's crib stood near the window, where morning light fell soft across his face. Harbor lay beside the crib, healed but slower now, his muzzle gray with ash. When Owen stirred, the dog lifted his head and gave that same low hum that had saved the child's life so many times before. Ria smiled, running her fingers through his fur. "You remember, don't you?" Harbor's tail brushed the floor once in answer. Gideon stopped by with papers in hand. "The case is closed," he said. "Merritt pleaded guilty. He won't see daylight for a long time." Ria let out a long breath. "It's finally done." "It's a new start," Gideon said softly. "For all 3 of you." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the quiet steadiness that had carried her through the worst. "You stayed when everyone else ran," she said. "Someone had to," he replied, smiling faintly. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ria rocked Owen to sleep. Harbor rested his head on the crib rail, eyes half-lidded, content. The fire flickered in the stove, casting gold across the room. Ria whispered into the quiet, "He trained you to protect his son, didn't he? You were his last promise to us." Harbor exhaled softly, the sound like a sigh of peace. Outside, snow fell again, gentle and endless, erasing the scars of fire. Inside, the mother, her child, and the loyal guardian that love had left behind finally rested. Safe, whole, and home. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.